Шановні колеги, шановні гості,
Dear colleagues, dear guests, welcome. Happy to see you at our event. I am thankful that despite the difficulties of the wartime, we have been able to gather in this room and our viewers have been able to join us online. I'm very thankful to the armed forces of Ukraine who demonstrate the impossible to the entire world. They are chasing the so-called second best army in the world away from the capital, from Kharkiv and Kherson, shoot down hypersonic missiles. I am confident that peaceful Ukraine will also surprise the world following our victory. The purpose of today's event is to draw attention to the needs of scientists and try to find ways to support science and research in Ukraine, and also think together about the ways to integrate Ukraine in the global research space. First, I would like to give the floor to the head of the National Research Fund of Ukraine, Stanislav Vilchinsky. Stanislav, the floor is yours. Stanislav, can you hear me? I am ready to give the floor to you, so please go ahead and make sure to unmute yourself so that we can hear you. Equipment is always a difficult thing. Hello, can you hear me? Yes, Stanislav, we can hear you. Thank you. Dear colleagues, I am happy to welcome you on behalf of the National Research Fund of Ukraine on the Science Day, our professional holiday. The circumstances are this way, and it's the second year that we are celebrating our holiday during wartime. We are still suffering the war which Russia, with its war criminal leader of Putin, started against Ukraine. An enormous number of scientific institutions, educational establishments have been destroyed or have suffered significant damage. There is a lot of destruction in terms of laboratories, equipment. We know the scale. It is almost catastrophic. In addition, as a result of this tragedy, hundreds of Ukrainian scientists have had to change their place of residence. Some have moved to other parts of Ukraine, while others were forced to leave the country. Well, this also affected the teams of scientific projects which are funded by the National Research Fund of Ukraine. A lot of teams have also ended up in a difficult situation due to all the struggles that we have faced. In 2022, the budget funding that the National Research Foundation had available was redirected to support the defense industry of Ukraine. And due to that, the majority of teams funded um, by the National Research Foundation, they continue their work despite everything, and we are proud of teams who continue their work faithfully, regardless of the circumstances. In 2023, thanks to the efforts of the government, thanks to the efforts of the designated Verkhovna Rada committee headed by Mr. Babak, with the support of the Ministry of Education and Science, the Ministry of Finance, the National Research Foundation of Ukraine received significant budget funding, not only to continue funding the projects that we already started before, such as winners of scientific competitions, but we will also have an opportunity to start financing the work of winners of the competition Ukraine Science for the post-war period. Of course, now we need more money, and the foundation makes every effort to engage funds not only from the state budget. We are very thankful to our international partners, particularly Cambridge University, which funded the contest of individual projects, who will also announced in the near future, just like winners of the Science in Ukraine for the post-war period competition. We are thankful to the National Research Foundation of Switzerland, which also allocated funds for joint research of uh, Ukrainian scientists and Swiss scientists, about 10 million Swiss francs. And I hope that the minor difficulties that currently exist, which stop us from announcing this competition officially and formally, will be soon addressed, and we will announce this competition and will be able to fund Ukrainian science in Ukraine. In addition, the foundation is intensely negotiating on certain agreements which will allow us to announce joint competitions with national research foundations of the United States, the Netherlands, Estonia, Poland, and Lithuania. Of course, the events that happened have led to significant change and new demands for science in Ukraine. There are a lot of needs now in terms of strengthening Ukraine's defense capacity, and our scientists, based on the projects we received for the science in the post-war period, so far they submit quite promising projects. I sincerely hope that in year 2024 we will be able to celebrate this holiday when Ukraine is completely free and independent, and these fascist troops completely disappear from our territory. Glory to our Ukraine. Ukraine will prevail. Glory to the heroes, and thank you. Thank you, Stanislav. We will continue. Responsible partners are the prerequisite for success in any situation. It is very important how the National Research Foundation interacts with the Ministry of Education and Science and Ukraine. We search for solutions and opportunities for development jointly. So I would like to invite Denis Kurbatov, Deputy Minister of Education and Science, to speak to us today. Denis, go ahead, please. Hello, dear colleagues, everyone who is present with us online as well. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for this format, for this wonderful event, and for the opportunity to share our thoughts, to exchange thoughts. Mr. Vilchinsky probably didn't misspeak when he said that it will be the Ministry of Science and Education rather than Education Science, and personally I support this idea. But before we can reach this, we still need to move to that point together with our scientific teams. Currently, we are in the situation when over 10% of scientists, probably the best scientists, have left the country. About 10% of scientists and teachers are IDPs, that is, they had to leave their places of work and residence. About 120 institutions of the Academy of Sciences and higher educational establishments have suffered damage due to the hostilities. The approximate amount of financial damage amounts to about $500 million. This is an approximate amount. But I want to say that the biggest losses that we are suffering are the human capital, of course. In the recent years, according to the Academy of Sciences, lost 43% of young scientists in their structure between 2017 and 2022. This is an enormous share, an enormous number, which we need to consider and interpret for ourselves. We actually understand that the country and the country's economy will not be the same as before after the victory. The resource-based economy will go into the past and we will need to form a new economy. What kind of economy will it be? Of course, it has to be focused on innovation. So our task and the task of our teams is to ensure that science becomes the basis for the development and formation of such an economy. In order to achieve this, we will need to get a lot of things done, but we naturally need to start from uniting. Ben Feringa, the 2016 Chemistry Nobel Prize winner, said this thing recently, which I read. He said, when I draw or show a molecule, it is the same. It is the same in the US, in China, in Australia, or in Europe. And I am confident that this molecule looks the same in the Academy of Sciences, in universities, in businesses that work on innovations. So my call for you is a call for uniting. We have common tasks and common challenges. Naturally, one of the ways to resolve these challenges, as we can see, is three main things. Considering the limits of public funding that exists now, we need to focus this funding on the best and most important things. We need to assess institutes, we need to assess universities, carry out certification of their scientific and academic activity in order to identify which of them are the most competitive and the best, and create basis for concentration of the best scientists on their basis. Secondly, considering the limits of these government resources, we need to remove barriers which currently exist for engagement of funds from businesses and from foreign international partners in order to fund research projects for business. We have a lot of problems in this sector, you know about them, such as fiscal pressure, the absence of banking accounts, problems with procurement, and an enormous number of other issues. And the third thing that we are planning to focus on is the emphasis on applied practical research. You understand that during the war and after the war, we will need to be basing our recovery on innovation and on things that our scientists can and will produce for victory. So again, I urge you to unite. I urge us to work together and talk to each other. I am thankful to the organizers for the invitation, and glory to Ukraine. Thank you, Denis. At our event, Anatoly Zagorodny, president of the National Academy of Sciences of Ukraine, could not be present personally, but I would like to read out his welcome word to the participants of this event. Dear colleagues, dear friends, it is an incredible honor and pleasure for me to congratulate you on the Science Day on behalf of the National Academy of Sciences of Ukraine. This day is important not only for scientists. Now that our country is going through difficult and dramatic times, the role of science in our life is growing ever more, and the achievements of our scientists have a big significance for all sectors of public life, particularly for further development of the economy and strengthening Ukraine's defense capacity. It is these achievements that give us faith that regardless of all the challenges and difficulties, Ukraine will have a chance for future development and flourishing. Together with all the scientific community, I am making effort to bring victory closer, and so does the National Research Foundation of Ukraine, providing support to fundamental research in the priority areas of educational science. It holds competitions aimed at resolving issues that are relevant for the country and society, their security and scientific progress. Today and in the following years, we will also have to resolve difficult tasks connected with the development of our economy and post-war reconstruction. And the National Research Foundation of Ukraine is already uniting a scientific community around it for effective work in these vectors. Developed science is also a prerequisite of further successful integration of Ukraine into the European Union. The National Research Foundation of Ukraine is one of the leaders in uniting Ukrainian science with European research communities. The task of our scientists is enormous. These tasks are difficult and require hard work, but I am confident that by joint effort we will be able to handle them well. So, congratulations on Science Day in Ukraine. I wish you all peace, health, fruitful work, and new accomplishments in the name of Ukraine. With sincere respect, President and Academician of the National Academy of Sciences of Ukraine, Anatoly Zagorodny. And we are moving on. Ukraine sees its future in the European community. We are thankful to the international community for its support, and we understand that a lot needs to be done for the integration into the global research space to happen. In particular, now the Foundation is working on the creation of the Office of Horizon Europe program in Ukraine. This means that soon Ukrainian scientists will have an opportunity to learn more about the opportunities provided by the Horizon program and other support programs for Ukraine in the sector of science and research. The following video address will come from our special guest, Deputy of the General Directorate on Research and Innovation of the European Commission, Signe Ratso.
Dear Olga, dear representatives of the research and innovation community, in the times of war, in view of pressing priorities, science can be easily forgotten. At the same time, science will be the foundation for Ukraine's recovery towards a modern and sustainable future. Therefore, many thanks to the National Research Foundation of Ukraine for organizing this event and for giving me a chance to present the EU work in support of Ukraine's research and innovation ecosystem. Ukraine is now an EU candidate country. This requires Ukraine's faster integration into the European research area and the new European innovation agenda. This, inter alia, depends on stronger cooperation on the Horizon Europe as well as on effective policy reforms. The more immediate need, however, is to preserve and nurture Ukraine's intellectual assets, giving the continuous destruction of the research infrastructure and explosive brain drain. These assets will be the backbone of Ukraine's reconstruction and will determine the pace of Ukraine's integration into the EU. In this context, from the side of the European Union, Ukraine's association to EU Horizon Europe and Euratom programs has been the key instrument of support. Ukrainian entities can participate in these programs on equal terms with entities from the EU member states. They can lead projects and are automatically eligible to EU funding. Moreover, all calls under Horizon Europe encourage the applicants to create opportunities for the affected Ukrainian research and innovation actors. And it is heartwarming to see that Ukraine participates in Horizon Europe on par with its best years under our predecessor Horizon 2020 program. So far, there have been 55 ongoing projects with a net EU contribution of almost 16.7 million. And we collaborate in different themes on strategic topics such as clean hydrogen, clean aviation, nature restoration and climate change. And there is potential to achieve further milestones. We are also very excited about the Horizon Europe office that is due to open in Kiev later this year. It will be hosted by the National Research Foundation of Ukraine and will become a top reference point for the Ukrainian and European researchers looking for funding opportunities and partners. We should also make better use of specific calls that we see as concrete opportunities for Ukraine. Let me mention the recent calls on political perspectives for the Eastern Neighborhood and Western Balkans, and also in the area of research infrastructure, both of which have a special focus on Ukraine. Now, talking about new opportunities, the revamped Horizon project now includes dedicated activities for Ukraine, in particular the ongoing 1.5 million call for remote fellowships. There is also an active call under the EU Cities mission that seeks to support peer-to-peer cooperation to help Ukrainian local authorities develop climate-neutral recovery plans. In addition, we should fully explore the Hop-On facility, which allows Ukrainian R&I actors to join ongoing Horizon projects that do not have a partner from a widening country. And there are over 150 eligible projects across different thematic areas. Now, in relation to innovation, the European Innovation Council allocated 20 million to support deep tech startups of Ukraine. The implementation will begin very soon with a focus on enterprises located both in and out of Ukraine. Moreover, under the upcoming call of the Excellence Hubs initiative, Ukrainian entities will be encouraged to apply for a mentoring scheme on innovation. We also care about the displaced scientists of Ukraine and support them through targeted measures. Thus, 124 scientists now continue their research across 21 countries in Europe, thanks to the dedicated fellowship scheme under Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions. After the war, the objective will be to reintegrate these scientists into Ukraine's R&I ecosystem. There are also other initiatives. I'd like to mention European Research Council, which continues to mobilize job opportunities among its grantees, while Ukrainian health scientists benefit from the Human Frontier Science Program. The International Human Frontier Science Program has launched, with the EU support, the Scientists for Scientists initiative to help 14 Ukrainian researchers affected by the war to continue their research in host institutions around the world. Just to give an example, the Helsinki Institute of Life Science hosts an Ukrainian researcher who is specialized in the biology of aging and studies the origins of cellular differentiation. Finally, under the Euratom program and with the support of the EU Joint Research Centre, we actively cooperate on nuclear safety and security, as well as on monitoring of radiological data, which is key in the context of ongoing war. All this ongoing cooperation is vital for Ukraine's faster integration into the European research area and innovation agenda. But opportunities do not stop here. As an associated country to Horizon Europe, Ukraine is an observer in the key governance structures of the research area and also in the program committees of Horizon Europe. Ukraine also participates in the development of the Black Sea Implementation Plan. For the cross-fertilization of innovation knowledge, Ukraine is invited to join the Coalition of the Willing and the European Innovation Council Forum. Moreover, the EU supports Ukraine with the smart specialization strategies and is ready to discuss experts' assistance for policy reforms in view of Ukraine's accession progress, and also in line with the objectives of the draft National Plan for Reconstruction and Development. However, we are fully aware that the ongoing war, with its devastating impacts on Ukraine's R&I ecosystem, poses new enormous challenges, both for Ukraine's integration as well as for Ukraine's sustainable recovery. R&I needs of Ukraine imply both physical reconstruction of research infrastructures, but also institutional capacity building, financial resources in the country, and also effective brain gain initiatives. As R&I stakeholders, it should be our common objective to ensure that Ukraine's needs in R&I find their prominent place in the key political frameworks on Ukraine's recovery, and that they get support from the planned multi-billion technical and financial assistance. Specific cases of member states, for instance Finland, or EU global partners like South Korea and Japan, show that massive investments in research and innovation are a key trigger for rapid and sustained economic growth. Ukraine should not be an exception, especially on our path towards common European future. Therefore, let's support science. Let's make knowledge work for the benefit of the country. Let's advocate for innovation in reconstruction so that this tragic situation is turned around and we find a rejuvenated, modern Ukraine on its other side. On this note, let me wish you a fruitful Science Day in Ukraine. Thank you.
Вельмишановні гості,
Dear guests, we are moving on to the second block of our event, and I would like to give the floor to the moderator, Yuri Halavtsev from Chernihiv National University. He is the co-founder of initiatives called UA Science Reload and Science at Risk. Yuri, the floor is yours. Thank you very much. In Ukraine, to coordinate the effort of different organizations and authorities, science institutions, ministries that are involved in science, there is a National Council on Development of Science and Technology. This is one of the key reforms of Ukrainian science in the past years. And in order to identify the problems that, from the scientific point of view, from the point of view of the scientists, now exist in Ukrainian science that need to be solved in a priority way, I would like to give the floor to the head of the scientific committee of this National Council, Mr. Alexei Kolezhuk. Mr. Kolezhuk, are you online? Yes, I am here. Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you fine. The floor is yours. First of all, I would like to, as a representative of the scientific committee, to greet the colleagues and congratulate them on the Science Day. And before we move on to discussion on the ways to support science in Ukraine during the war, I would like to share several remarks on science in Ukraine during the war, on whether we should be in the survival mode or development mode. I think that you've heard this opinion for a while, many times now, that the war is the time for survival and reforms should happen later. I will try to convince you that this approach is wrong and that we need to be thinking about reforms now. In order to do so, I would like to first remind you that the problems that
the scientific sphere in Ukraine is going through now, they are unfortunately only partially related to the war. And if we look at the tendencies of development of the scientific sphere in Ukraine in the past decade or even more, we could compare even the earlier years, you see that based on this chart, we have the decrease of number of researchers per 1 million of population, and in this trend, we are contrary to the average indicators in the EU and also the countries who started at approximately the same place as we have quite recently. If we look at the spending for R&D in percentage from the GDP, you can see that everybody is more or less going up and Ukraine is decreasing its spending. So this indicator already could show the person who's not acquainted with the Ukrainian scientific sphere can show them that the problem started long before the war with Russia has started. And if we outline these problems in greater detail, we receive this cluster of interrelated problems that start probably with the most root problem. There's a weak link of science and economy, so Ukraine unfortunately had rather low technology economy and this limited in a natural way the demand for scientific research, and accordingly there is little stimulus for private investment. And we could argue whether this led to what happened next or whether these things were developing simultaneously, but at some point Ukraine lost the general strategy for science development, the general vision. So science became something similar to art. It stopped being a priority to policymakers, and gradually it developed to the lack of trust between all the main stakeholders of the scientific sphere. And we see the consequences of that, and we started seeing that a while ago. The important role, we should also be quite sincere about that, is that we maintain the post-Soviet structure of managing science and organizing science. One of them is the Academy of Sciences, science and research being separate, so these are two almost parallel worlds, the Academy of Sciences and the universities. The outdated financing mechanisms that are not well fit for the current ways the research are done. So we observe and regress here. Unfortunately, we also have problems with human capital. We can often hear this mantra that in human capital we are in top positions, but unfortunately this is also not exactly correct. So for a rather long period, when we accumulated all of these problems in the scientific sphere, this naturally led to negative backlash, and it gave way to development of such things that you all know well about, the lack of the imitation of science, the lack of honesty and transparency in science, and so on. We have the outdated resource base. We have the lack of strategy of modernization. This issue has not been in focus for at least the past 10 years. And finally, we also have the problems of international cooperation. We should also be honest in saying that it is also because of the low level of English in Ukraine in general. This is low academic mobility, which is of course related to low salaries. This is us being separated from the world science, this lack of strategies and internationalization and so on and so forth. So we see all of these issues, problems that existed even before the full-scale invasion, and they have existed for a while, and the war has deepened and bared all of these issues. And of course there is direct losses. The damage to research infrastructure has been done. Of course, a lot of human capital is endangered, both the people who have left Ukraine and people who moved inside Ukraine. These are the research groups that got separated, the research that is paused, the budgets are decreased, financing freezing. The perspectives are quite unclear. So all of this adds to that very brain drain, not only to the outside, but also inside, when people just do not see the perspective for themselves in science. And we should also say that although we can consider that we have maintained the majority of the human capital, the results of polls that Yuri can also comment on says that 73% of researchers who responded said that they had psychological problems when conducting research to maintain the necessary level of concentration. And finally, we should also mention the ban on trips. That, of course, is the result of the martial law, but they also contribute to halting the international cooperation. Seeing all of these issues and adding up the military problems to that and comparing these problems with our goals of post-war development, we can make certain conclusions. Post-war recovery, together with the ambitious goal of entering the European Union, poses very, very serious tasks in front of Ukraine. This is in-depth modernization of Ukrainian economy. We need to transfer from our low technology, coal-based industry somehow to the level that will allow us to be self-sufficient as a new member of the EU. And if we ask ourselves about the way from point A to point B that is possible, what kind of a way we can imagine here, there's a very simple answer. There's no other way except basing all of this on science and innovations, and this must be the main driver. Ukraine with weak science is weak Ukraine, and the weak Ukraine isn't for our interests or our international donors' interests or our allies. We need to be strong, so we must have strong science. And this gives the answer to the question whether we should be in survival mode now or we should start moving. Because all of this cluster of problems, it will not solve itself. This node needs to be solved, and if we could word some basic principles that we should use for post-war recovery of science, first, this requires deep changes in the state policy and a fundamental reform of the scientific sphere. And this is necessary now. We cannot wait until the war ends. If we wait until the war ends, we will have the starting point that is much lower, much worse than what we have right now. This is why we need to start now. And human capital, of course, is of key importance. Science is scientists. This is why this human capital needs to not only be maintained, needs to not only be prevented from disappearing because of the lack of salaries, and of course this also needs to be done with short-term measures of support. But we also need to think already now about the long-term measures, about the development of those researchers in the human capital, and bringing back those researchers who are in shock from war back to their academic lives. And of course the key moment here is the international integration. And on this way of reforms, the long-term support from the side of the European Union, we would really like for it to serve the driver of changes, promoting the development of new policies, new organizational structures and instruments that will define the vector of transformation for this sector. It is possible to involve not only the state but also the private capital to it. I will not be talking about any specific measures now, because I think that during the panel discussion my colleagues will introduce their view of specific measures, the way they see it. But the only thing I'd like to say that one of the elements of such integration is the foundation of centers of excellence. And we have several examples of such initiatives that are either being implemented or have been implemented already, and we would like to hope that on this way we will see many more similar initiatives and their support. Thank you for your attention. The full work of many institutions and branches depends on Ukrainian legislation, and how clear it is, but voting is only a smaller part of the job that you need to do for new legislation to appear, and the biggest discussions usually happen at the meetings of the Line Committee, the parliamentary hearings, and we're meeting the voters. We would like to thank the head of the Committee of Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine on Education, Science and Innovation for his uncompromised position and defending the principles of competitive financing, and we would like to give the floor to him. Mr. I apologize for not being able to join you offline. I really wanted to do it, but the business trip prevented me from doing so. I would not like to be speaking of the problems, to be honest. We should probably not be thanking the committee. This is our work that we are doing, and we are trying to do it so that we do not feel any shame for that, and you do not feel any shame for our decisions. In terms of legislation, we are doing everything possible, and all of the initiatives for research are always supported in the committee and in the parliament, although the discussions are sometimes very hard. I'm very glad that despite the war and the martial law, the decreased budgets and the shelling, the destroyed infrastructure, and the outflow of people abroad, we are trying to maintain at least some kind of potential in the country. Despite the wartime budget of this year, the Ministry of Finances gave us the opportunity, the possibility to bring back the financing of the National Research Fund so that the teams, luckily we still have the teams here in Ukraine, so that the scientists would continue to work on their projects. We introduced the changes to the legislation so that the National Fund could finally start bilateral research financing, not only from Ukraine, but also with additional funding from the donors. We will continue to do so. I'm very happy that we have the new team of the Ministry of Science and Education. We are really hopeful. We are very happy that we have a profile Vice Prime Minister who understands what innovation is, and in our discussions with them, now we emphasize the innovations. So we do have science, we do have scientific results. The biggest problem, in my opinion, that there is that science is a little bit separate from the economy. And this problem is not of the scientists, but probably it is an economic problem, because the main task of the scientists, in fact, is it's not the task of the scientists to commercialize their results. They need to be helped doing so. And this is what we're emphasizing when talking and planning the new team with the new Ministry of Sciences, as with the new Vice Prime Minister. And I don't know, maybe it's too early to announce that, but we are preparing with the National Research Fund, Ukrainian Startup Fund, the first presentations, the first pitchings of those scientific development that were financed by the state budget, so that they would transfer to economy and started working for Ukraine. The fund of startups has now made a lot of progress in grant financing of technological developments, and I'd like to encourage all the scientists to apply for those contests. There will be money in Ukraine, maybe not the amount that we would like, but we will do everything possible on our side so that scientists would have better lives, and they could continue to create, and that their results became the part of the economy. And most importantly, I would like to thank each and every one of you for continuing to do science in Ukraine, continuing to move Ukraine forward, both technologically and scientifically. Happy Science Day. Thank you. Thank you. And we continue our discussion today. Now it will happen in the mixed format. We will have some people present here. Mrs. Olga Budnik, she is the advisor to the President of Ukraine on the Fund of the President of Ukraine for support of education, science and sport. Please come up here. And also Ihor Taranov, he is the Director General of the Ministry of Education and Science of Ukraine, Directorate on Science and Innovation. And we also have participating online Yulia Bezvershenko. She is the co-founder of the UN's Science Reload Initiative and Science at Risk Initiative. Yulia, are you online with us? Hello? I don't know if we're able to see her. Yes, thank you very much. Now we can start. So we have heard two rather one optimistic and the second one more realistic view on the real state of things with science in Ukraine. And we have the reality, and this reality we need to try to change somehow. If we don't think about it, then evidently it will be difficult for us to plan, and then accordingly this plan will not turn into action. So first, I would like us to talk about how we see the role of science in the war. Many people talk about it. Some people do understand this, but maybe Igor, you can add a little bit to that on how, from the point of view of the ministry, if there is active cooperation of scientists with the real sector. Maybe we will not discuss the defense sector in bigger detail here, but maybe some things could be cited as an example. And then we will also like to talk about whether this can be improved. Well, first of all, okay, thank you, Yuri. First of all, I would like to congratulate all the participants of today's meeting with the Science Day. If you are among the scientists, there's a special atmosphere, special rhythm of life, special aspirations and thoughts. All of your things are already catalyzing into some product and becoming something that you can do. And indeed, Ukraine during the war has suffered many losses. Oleksiy Kulizhuk mentioned this infrastructure started being destroyed after the aggression in February, and our main centers have also suffered a lot of damage. The infrastructure is damaged for over 15%, and we also have higher education facilities, science facilities that very actively work in food security sphere, and a lot of research areas of lands they're now mined, so we cannot conduct any kind of research there. We cannot use those lands. Signaratsu has spoken very well today that Ukraine is the member of the joint maritime order for the Black Sea. And I would also like to emphasize here that we have very, very limited possibilities here. We can only do the outside photo shoot research because the coastline is also mined, is also dangerous. The sea is very polluted. The aquaculture, the sea mammals are dying, and we can also do any research there. The role of business cannot be underappreciated in cooperation with science now, because we're used to saying that there is a triangle: science, business, and innovations. We have seriously limited financial resources now, and we should not be saying that only sufficient financial resources will be the basis that science will be developing quickly with high speed, because human capital is at the basis and the scientists who will be working and using these resources. But whether the business now is helping science, whether business is trying to invest as much as possible to developing science, yes, there is an understanding in the business sphere that scientists need to be supported, but there is also a problem that is a dilemma for business in a way. What does the business receive as a result after they invest their funds? Will they be able to receive the expected income? Will they be able to use the development that is developed into a prototype? Will they be able to scale it and bring it to the market, and in this way to receive even more additional resources that may further be invested into development of scientific research? So in fact, the problem is in that there is weak communication mechanism between business and the scientific sphere. Sometimes indeed the problem is that business institutions do not quite have truthful information about what a scientific team, a specific scientist, an institution, a university do, or what they can offer to business. And such development should indeed be very interesting for business structures. We are trying to cooperate as much as possible in this with the business institutions, to involve them to various communication events. Those are hackathons, those are innovation festivals. any kind of pitchings that are also being held. You must know that recently in Taras Shevchenko University there was an innovation festival, and in a way we're also trying to draw attention of business to supporting scientists, and also we must also project all of our thoughts and aim our thoughts at what the legislation is in Ukraine now and whether it stimulates business to invest in scientific development and in scientific research. Unfortunately, we can say that there is still a very long way to go in terms of legislation before it can successfully satisfy both the business component and the scientific component. Of course, we need to think that with the use of the thoughts of stakeholders, of all the parties that are interested, of the external experts, we need to develop the optimal option to support business and to support the scientific sphere. And it depends on us how fast we can do that. On whether business is indeed ready to invest, I will underline again that it is ready to invest, but they want to see what they receive as an end result. It is important that in this direction we use digital instruments to make it possible for the business to find out about what scientists can do. However, I will remind you that business is always analyzing this in great detail, because during the martial law, the financial risks increase many times, as well as the income that can be received from introduction of informational products and developments can also increase. On supporting the developments in defense technologies, we cannot talk a lot about that because there is limited information that can harm national security of Ukraine. But some institutions that work in this research receive outside financing. So in this way, by diversifying the financial risks and by distributing between different financial sources, we can improve financing of science so that we could say that indeed we are implementing the law on science and scientific and technical activities, despite the fact that this is state financing, of course a certain percent, or financing from other sources, but the science receives what it needs to receive. Foreign donors and international partners, everybody is trying to help to the extent that they can. The scientific research, Signe Ratzer said, mentioned today several programs, and also the European Innovation Council that has issued a grant for 20 million euro to support highly technological startups. But we should also remember that the donors will finance Ukraine, seeing the end results. If this is effective, if it is aimed at recovery of our country, then they will support as much as they can. And before I finish, what we've been able to do, maybe it's interesting to our scientists. If you remember, we have been trying to introduce changes to the legislation, to the budget code of Ukraine for a long time, to Article 13 that regulates the use of the money from the special fund, and we tried when we tried to work on legislation on the activities of the scientific parts, we developed the changes to the budget code that provide the opportunity to state-owned universities to use the 30% of the money that comes into the special fund to their development. But this part of the article will be implemented since January 1st of 2024. So there is cooperation between business and science, but unfortunately it is not sufficient at the moment. I will briefly end that there is this kind of business that makes competitive equipment for scientific research. There are producers of analyzers, gene fluorescent analyzers, and so on and so forth. Of course, now the buying capacity internally is not high enough, but we could maybe think of a state program that would support such producers, where we could buy such equipment for our institutions, for our research institute, the universities, and so on. So the money would stay in Ukraine, in fact, but we could improve, renew the equipment Indeed, there are some competitive, even at the world market, producers, but I'm very much not sure that many pieces of such equipment are currently installed in Ukraine. So, as a form of cooperation, it could also support this business and at the same time strengthen science and also keep money in Ukraine. Maybe this is something that's worth thinking about. Thank you. Of course, I'd like to remind you that indeed the ministry, there is an idea to support with the state money the development of research infrastructure. We have a corresponding concept that we've developed and also a project of a state program that's been developed. But the war that started led to us needing to recalculate the cost of this research infrastructure that needs to be restored or of the things that we need to buy anew. As an example, we have Boris Alexandrov, the research ship. Unfortunately, we bought it to do sea research. However, unfortunately, we have saved the ship when the aggression started. It is in a safe place, but there is no equipment there. There are no laboratory equipment there or anything like that. When we started identifying the amount that we need to put on the state program to develop the state infrastructure, these numbers started changing daily. So for this, we need to wait until the war ends, calculate correctly. This is on the side of the state. Of course, on the side of involving the business, if the business is ready to invest, scientists will be very gladly to accept their help.
Thank you. Apart from the material resource, there should also be human resource. We have talked a lot about this as well. And we understand that without people coming back, without bring people back to the condition which they can work productively in a creative manner, it will be difficult. That's why I would like to ask Oля. We hear on various platforms about initiatives of the Presidential Foundation. We hear about various initiatives that are about brain gain, about the opportunities to improve the qualifications of our scientists abroad. What do you think about this? What is the possible short-term perspective that we have? And how will it possibly affect the ability of Ukrainian science to recover? Thank you. If I may, I will follow up with the previous question as well, because I really wanted to add a few points to the discussion while it was ongoing. You know, when we have this conversation about business and commercialization, we always have this conversation without businesses, and it would be important to consider what they think and what they expect. That's the first point. And the second point, in the context of how business works, there are very few representatives of the business who feel like they should help apart from help to the armed forces, because army is obviously the primary beneficiary in people's minds. So I think it would make sense to rather look at the format of investment, and the main goal of business is to increase profits. And if scientific innovations don't contribute to that, what sense does it make for business? So the idea is, how do we build this path from the scientist to business in order to make sure this research can be fully applied? And in this context, I think we need to start thinking from the very beginning, what are our goals and what do we propose? As for the role of scientists during the war, I think, as strange as it may sound, it may be people's time in the spotlight, as strange as it may seem, because previously we have not articulated the need for science and innovation as much as now. On the one hand, the war really highlighted some issues that we never discussed before, and on the other hand, the war gave us new challenges, and who, if not scientists, should respond to the challenges? And here we can speak that every scientist can offer some solutions on a certain subject. And going back to the subject of internationalization, which is done by the Presidential Foundation, we don't want to promote the idea that our scientists are highly effective abroad and we need to support them only when they are abroad. We are super interested in making sure that we engage those who ended up abroad now or before to make sure they participate in development of policies in Ukraine, in research that can now be useful for Ukraine in various sectors. Igor already said that there is this example of demining, for instance. We need solutions that don't exist in the world yet because existing technologies give us almost 100-year timeline for demining. Obviously, our schedules give us new categories. This is also a field for research. So when we speak about international opportunities, the first thing that we do, one of the things that we are doing in order to unite diaspora of Ukrainians abroad and unite it with the needs of Ukraine that exist today. That's something highly important. I am fully confident. I think that all funding should create a certain ecosystem without duplicating each other. I am happy that each of us has our own niche in which we are working, and we focus more on engaging scientists in the formation of policies. Having the opportunity to support the government to offer evidence-based, how should I put it in Ukrainian, solutions. Yeah, so evidence-based solutions when we can have this database of evidence for informed decision. That's what we are working towards. We have just come back from a conference in London, and they were talking that maybe it makes sense to use the experience of the UK, where they have a chief scientific advisor in every ministry. This is a person who has a team of scientists helping each individual ministry to make decisions, and there is funding for this. If we look at the historic origins of the system, they started it after the First World War, and the first chief scientific advisor was an advisor to the Ministry of Defense, actually. So in our situation, we can have quite a similar story, and maybe we'll also be able to develop some pilot solutions. The most important thing is that we need to speak a language that will be understood. If we speak about policymakers, if we speak about business, we need to understand that science speaks its own language, and we need to find bridges that will unite us. Like they are saying, we need something, we are saying, but we need something, we are doing this and we are doing that, and everyone is trying to play this tug of war. So I think we need to facilitate these processes and show the results in the near future. Thank you. I would like to go back to this subject when we speak about educational gaps in terms of education very often. What our students of schools, of universities have lost due to the war and due to COVID. And I would like to ask Yulia Bezvershenko about her thoughts on the scientific gaps. Alexei has already spoken a bit about that, but maybe there is something to be said in terms of that. Maybe we can catch up on something that we've lost. Yulia, go ahead, please. Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes. I am thankful to the National Research Foundation for organizing this event. Unfortunately, during the year, beyond the scientific community, there is not a lot of conversation about science, and this was even before the full-scale invasion. But now I agree with the colleagues that science emerges in more and more conversations. But if we are speaking seriously about the problems that existed before, Alexei spoke today that we arrived at the point of the full-scale invasion with a certain set of structural problems, and there are consequences that only deepened during the war. This discussion beyond the scientific community is largely lacking. So if we speak about scientific gaps, I think it is quite a good way to put it, to phrase it. And I am very supportive of showing where we were at the point of the crisis and what made this crisis deeper, or what tendencies have become particularly critical. Looking at what we had before, we understand that there are some long-term problems without eliminating which any struggle for survival or compensation of the needs and challenges emerging during the war, during the crisis, would be insufficient, because it would only be on the surface of those gaps which will prevent the system from recovering. And there is a good phrase that is now being used, and the world is speaking a lot about high resilience of the Ukrainian state, of Ukrainian society, of various institutions. And this largely depends on the previous history. And scientific gaps that we have today are partly connected with the fact that science did not function in the optimum way before as a system. There were no financial tools which would be diversified enough. There were no specific policies on the development of human potential. There were no scientist-specific proposals on career development within the country. There were major issues with strategic planning and development of research infrastructure. Our integration in the global space was mostly based on scientists themselves, and the state probably had only isolated interventions, such as signing of international agreements. Those were the only cases when the government got involved. But after international agreements were signed, very often no steps were taken to, or no systemic steps at least, to integrate. So if we list all of that and many other issues, and if we ask what happened during the war, it is indeed exacerbated by the problems that emerged during the war. There were already 2 waves of survey of Ukrainian science reload. I hope they will continue. I can share a link later, and we see that there are also personal problems, psychological problems connected with relocation within the country, to breaking ties within groups due to such relocations, and so on. The impossibility to plan scientific research, which means that we are now looking at a rather basic approach in the international community of project funding as an important element of engaging financial tools. And this method cannot be the main method anymore, because it is very difficult to plan activities, to plan access to infrastructure, to plan preservation of groups. And we need to offer more flexible tools within the country, which would be a challenge for our institutions. And I am happy that the Presidential Foundation and other institutions are looking for new forms, which requires them to be flexible and which requires wisdom from the government and the parliament. And this helps us look for new opportunities in the current situation, look for new opportunities to support professional scientists when such opportunities are lacking. And when this is impossible, we need to ask ourselves the question of preserving the human resources. So maybe it would even make sense to ensure merit-based funding rather than prospective funding. If the scientist has an opportunity, they will do something. If there is no opportunity, it does not entirely depend on the scientist himself or herself. Now let's look at institutions. Before the war, institutions did not have enough capacity, which means that there was not enough funding. There was insufficient institutional culture. Olga also spoke about evidence-based policy making, about basing governmental decisions on data, on analysis, and so on. When all of this was not developed or underdeveloped, of course, it is difficult to build this capacity during the crisis. It is difficult to make better decisions than before. It's difficult to hope that certain courses of actions which had to be developed long ago will be actively implemented today. But the resilience of people is so strong again. Ukraine is basically surviving on people's backs, essentially at the level of specific institutions, specific people, even without protocols of response. It still saves the research infrastructure, archives, museum collections, which we are now studying as part of our Science at Risk project. People on the ground are coming up with ways to save things that they are responsible for, while the state is looking for new tools. I really hope that, on the one hand, there will be maximum facilitation and support of such initiatives at every level, so that such initiatives can be supported or at least not inhibited at every level where they are working. And I would hope that there would be help from the government and from our international partners. Currently, all levels of the system, wherever and whatever they are, require this mutual help, require fast decision making. And this would make a lot of sense now. And of course, today we talked about science and business, or science for something, like science for the economy, science for the state, science for society. Unfortunately, these things were really lacking before the war, and it wasn't scientists' fault. Yes, it was part of scientific culture, but there were no tools which would create. Well, I cannot say that the government or society or science can really articulate their needs well. On the other hand, scientists sometimes have to sort of come up with ideas where they could apply their research. They have an idea, they don't have a client. So I think that, as tragic as the war is really a time when all parties understand the importance of cooperation, and that is why they are more open to dialogue. And the issue here is learning to progress together and looking for resource, because the issue of resources is much more acute than before, and there is a demand. It is important to work with the demand. And in addition to working together with each other, we also see our international partners, our friends who have been supporting scientists, supporting the National Research Foundation of Ukraine, and who are doing this systematically and helping us expand such partnerships. And it is important here that we should be able to articulate our needs. We should be able to show that we have established a dialogue within the country, that we understand each other, we know what we need. In particular, such cooperation programs, that we have set up such cooperation programs that we can support this value for the government and for our partners. I'm confident we will find people who will believe us and support us. And the last thing in terms of this is that what we are doing now, we are doing to survive, on the one hand, to preserve people, institutions, scientific artifacts, scientific research. everything that we call the scientific system. And on the other hand, we are saying that the vision of Ukraine after the war is ambitious. We want a strong country, and it is supported by the entire world. The world sees Ukraine, the world should see Ukraine technological, innovative, because only that way Ukraine will be able to guarantee its development. And we understand very well, unfortunately, not everyone understands it, but there is science and human capital in all of these words, and there are all these connections we are speaking about. Science for the formation of state decisions. And the question here is whether we fully understand that the problem of Ukrainian science and all these science gaps at the individual, collective, institutional, national, and international levels that exist in Ukrainian science, they essentially undermine the ability to implement this vision of Ukraine after the victory, and whether all stakeholders in Ukraine understand this, not just in the scientific sector, but overall those who make governmental decisions, because the issue of priorities between policies and sciences is always acute, and whether we articulate it enough in the conversation with our international partners, because if that's how it is, and we are working on that, then we are resolving each of these problems in order to build this bridge and to understand how we strengthen not just science itself, how we strengthen education, but how we are moving towards this goal, Ukraine after the war, after the victory. If we don't invest today, if we don't resolve these issues today, if we lose people today, if we lose this potential today, and if we don't develop it during the war, you don't overcome these gaps connected with the war which existed before the war, and they were a lot, then this dream is questionable, and then we need to reconsider this conversation from the beginning, and we need to understand what we consider our priority and what is our honest response to the question whether we are really moving forward or not.
So today it's not just the opportunity for science as it is, but also the time of the opportunity for the state to become conscious of its ambition, to be strong, to be smart, to be a leader and part of the strong international union, and to correspondingly understand the role of science with it. Thank you very much. We must move on. What I liked recently is our commander-in-chief in his interview said that in the world with the development of science, it was hard for him to imagine to have combat like that, a war like that. And here we need to have a deeper thought about it, in my opinion, because evidently NATO, we know it as an alliance, they also have a program that is called Science for Peace and Security. So we need to think all together that science is not only, a guarantee of maintaining a country, not only a guarantee of development in a country, but also a guarantee of peace primarily. So serious development of science, development of business that is based on this science, development of the international cooperation also in science, they will be this guarantee of peace that all of us must dream, think about and work on. And I thank the participants of our panel discussion. We must move on further onto our agenda. The best luck to you all. Dear guests, I'm happy to announce that we are moving on to block 3. This is also the final block on our agenda, the session that's called Integration into the World Research Area and International Cooperation. The association called Science Europe unites the most powerful international organizations in science in Europe. Science Europe supported Ukraine in the first and most important weeks and months of the war. This support is impossible to overestimate. Great achievement of the international cooperation of the National Research Fund of Ukraine in the past 2022 was the full membership in the association Science Europe. So I would like to give the floor to Mrs. Secretary General of Science Europe, Lydia Borrell-Damian.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me? I hope so. Thank you. It is a pleasure to address the audience in this very special day, the second Science Day in Ukraine. Congratulations, Ukraine. Congratulations, National Research Foundation of Ukraine, on this important celebration. I am extremely pleased to have received an invitation to speak at this event, and I would like to take this opportunity to reiterate our solidarity with the people of Ukraine. Ukraine is a valued member of the international research community and a strong partner on European research funding and performing organizations. As the Secretary General of Science Europe and a proud member of the International Board of Counselors at the National Research Foundation of Ukraine, I can't stress enough that the Ukrainian research community is at the forefront of world-leading research in many scientific fields, and this despite of the strenuous circumstances in your country. Further integrating Ukraine into the European research ecosystems allows Ukrainian researchers to foster collaboration, sharing knowledge and expertise with their European peers, which this can only result in fresh insights, innovative solutions, and faster scientific progress. Science Europe welcomes very much Ukraine's association to the Horizon Europe program and Euratom program, and the announcement of a new Horizon Europe program office in Kiev at the end of 2023, as Signalax explained before, is great, is fantastic. The benefits of this collaboration are made evident by the fact that despite all the damages inflicted on researchers and research infrastructure, Ukrainian research and innovation actors do participate in 49 Horizon Europe grants on par with pre-war levels. Therefore, Ukraine should continue to be involved in Horizon Europe and, of course, in the policy development related to the European research area. Another remarkable achievement of cooperation between Ukrainian and European research actors and beyond Europe is the establishment of the International Center of Mathematics in Ukraine. Leading Ukrainian mathematicians gathered the support of researchers and research organizations across Europe, at least including Science Europe, to set up this ambitious center and start doing so during the war, and at the same time bringing together an impressive group of international mathematicians as part of its advisory board. Yes, it has been said the National Research Foundation of Ukraine was welcomed last year as a member of Science Europe, and it has proven a super valuable member for the research organization. It has been engaging in many working groups: open science, research culture, the European research area policy through the high-level policy network, through the working group of Horizon Europe, and through organizing events in support of the reconstruction of the Ukrainian system. For its part, individually, Science Europe members, some of them have done humongous efforts also to host not only researchers and to develop research programs, but also I think your neighbors, geographical neighbors have been incredible also in supporting human assistance, which is only speaks very high of them, of course. Very recently, Science Europe and RFU co-organized a side event during the International Science Council and ALEA, All European Academies, second conference on the crisis in Ukraine, with a clear intention to bring forward best practice from all over the world to support the reconstruction of the Ukrainian system. Through a series of very valuable presentations highlighting strategies and good practice examples, the event concluded that indeed doing more of these kind of events, bringing together the perspectives of Ukrainian and European stakeholders and institutions was very important to explore ways to rebuild the system and help you paving the ground for developing effective management and of national and European funding. Currently, the Science Europe is collaborating with the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering and Medicine in the United States, NASEM. We are organizing a workshop on preserving and developing Ukrainians' human capital in research, education, and innovation. It is an event that will span across 4 days. A central day for us is 21st of June, where several Science Europe members will explain their experience, as well as the European Research Council. And this event will focus on strengthening the capacity of the Ukrainian research systems through international partnerships, strengthening the networking capacity and management skills in Ukraine, and we'll discuss the perspective of research funders in support of Ukraine. To conclude, I would like to say that the National Research Foundation of Ukraine has embedded itself very much in European funding landscape, but also being part of European funding and performing organizations, and is developing cooperation with many research organizations. It is essential from our view to preserve Ukrainians and research and Ukraine's place as a close collaborator in the European Union and beyond, and to contribute to further involve the Ukrainian research ecosystem to be rebuilt, to enable rebuilding as soon as possible. And with these remarks, I would like to conclude my intervention, congratulating you again and thanking you for listening to me.
А ми рухаємося далі.
Moving on, I would like to say that invaluable for Ukrainian scientists was and is the support of the Polish Academy of Sciences. Polish Academy of Sciences in the first days of the war supported Ukrainian researchers. In 2022, Polish Academy of Sciences financed 250 Ukrainian scientists. And currently, they support research teams from Ukraine and in Ukraine, so I'm very happy to give the floor to the director of the representative office of Polish Academy of Sciences in Kyiv, Mr. Mateusz Bialasz. Mr. Bialasz,
Microphone.
So, welcome everyone. My name is Mateusz Bialasz. I'm a director of the Polish Academy of Sciences representative office in Kyiv. Currently, due to the situation that occurs, I'm based in Warsaw, but I hope that next year, we'll meet already in Kyiv personally. From time to time, as far as possible, we try to visit Ukraine, both Lviv, Kyiv, and other cities, depending on the situation and our partnerships. Very briefly about what we plan to do is like looking forward oriented, maybe not summarizing what we have done during the last year, because that was already mentioned. What we expect in the next days is results of the long-term program for Ukrainian scholars that we've launched together with the National Academy of Sciences. But I think the next speaker, Bogan, will tell a bit more about that. But very briefly, our aim was to support scholars that are based in Ukraine. Last year, we focused on those who left Ukraine, but it was very urgent support that we would like to provide to our partners. Currently, we have to look and plan in long term. So that's the reason we will have long-term program that will engage one scholar PI who will be based in Warsaw, but his team could be based in Ukraine, and that is really important to us to have these teams of scholars and researchers with provided salary who will be able to work in Ukraine. That's the first. The second activity that we would like to develop is capacity building trainings for scholars in Ukraine. We strongly believe that many researchers are still based in Ukraine. Some of them are IDPs, so moved maybe to other cities, but still the biggest challenge, let's say, is financing of scientific activity, and many grants will be available based on competitive basis. So what we would like to do is to cooperate with the best scientific units and institutions like NRFU, for instance, and National Academy of Sciences, in cooperation also with the Ministry for Science and Education, to develop a network of science support offices in Ukraine. I hope it will start next year, but we'll still have to wait a little bit for results of the competition. And it will be combined with a number of trainings on project management, grants application, etc., because that's what we need like now actually to develop consortiums as well and cooperation with international partners. That's very briefly. Honestly, I really hope that the situation will calm down and in the nearest future, and we'll be able to be back with our activity in Ukraine as fast as possible. All the best, and thank you so much for inviting me.
Виконуючий директор
Executive Director on Policy and Global Relations, National Academies of Sciences, Engineering and Medicine of the United States of America, von Torokyan, attended Kyiv and the National Research Foundation of Ukraine in April this year. But the quest of the ways to support Ukrainian science was started by NASA much earlier. So I would like to give the floor to Mr. Torokyan.
Thank you so much for inviting me to participate today. Let me get to a better place here. It is a great honor for me to be able to participate in your National Science Day. This is a very important day for scientists in Ukraine, but truthfully, it's important for scientists around the world. It is important because the scientific community feels a great connection to our colleagues in Ukraine, and much of the difficulties that the scientific community has had over the last year and a half, or a little bit more, less than year and a half. And so it is wonderful to be able to have the opportunity to celebrate this event with you, our colleagues. As mentioned in the introduction, I had the great pleasure and the great honor of visiting Kyiv earlier this year, and an opportunity to meet so many of our counterparts and our colleagues in the scientific community in Ukraine. I really enjoyed that visit and look forward to making many more visits. And I say that because, as you have seen and heard, the number of scientists that are deeply connected to Ukraine and the struggle that Ukraine is going through right now, both on the in the war, but also in the critical part of rebuilding is something that we feel deeply connected to. It is also something that the U.S. National Academy of Sciences has been involved with from the very early days of the war. My colleague Mateusz spoke about a very strong partnership between the U.S. National Academy of Sciences and the Polish Academy in really the first days of the war, when so many Ukrainians were forced to flee their homes and flee their country. We had the opportunity to work with our colleagues in Poland to identify some funding from the United States to help support that effort that Mateusz spoke about, to help some of the colleagues that had to leave Ukraine and go into Poland. And as Mateusz just mentioned, we have now worked even more to think about new programs, not only to support the researchers or some researchers in Poland, but critically to find funding for researchers that are part of teams based in Ukraine. In fact, I will mention that one of the most important things that we had as a principle from the early days of the war was actually two principles. One was what we were going to do was make sure that, well, three actually. One was whatever we were going to do was not going to be in conflict with what other groups were doing. We weren't going to have our own program separate from what was already taking place. And so our partnership with the Polish Academy and the Ukrainian Academy has been so critical to build on a program rather than try to create just a new one. Second one, we had as a very high priority that we were going to continue to support Ukrainian researchers so that scientists could remain connected to science. And third, and critically, we were going to make sure that whatever we focused on was going to be respectful, to make sure that we were not going to contribute to the brain drain. We wanted to make sure that whatever we did was to support researchers that stayed close to Ukraine, maybe across the border in Poland in based circumstances, but also to make sure that we would find ways to fund in the future Ukrainian researchers who remained in Ukraine. And that's the program that Mateusz just announced. And we are thinking about other programs that have that same principle, to help support researchers, but also to support researchers who stay connected to Ukraine and inside of Ukraine and connected to Ukrainian research. At the same time, we have very much appreciated the partnerships that we've established. The president of the U.S. National Academy of Sciences has built a strong partnership with her colleagues in many other European academies of sciences to make sure that our efforts across the academies are well coordinated and can build together. We all met in Poland last year in June, and we're planning on meeting again this June to go over an action plan and a series of action plans to think about how to help Ukrainian research, both in the near term, but in the longer term. Along those lines, we established a program in March and April of last year. I see Gerson Shearer on the line, who will be speaking later, and my colleague, Kathy Campbell, who were very critical in helping bring together a number of people, including Julia and others, to help think through how the National Academy of Sciences can best support, in one of our important roles, providing advice to the US government on how they might think about issues around science and innovation and the role of science and innovation as it connects to Ukraine's future. And along those lines, I'll finish by saying, and last week, the president of the National Academy of Sciences and president of a major foundation in the United States convened a group of very senior US government officials, including senior State Department officials, senior officials from the Department of Energy, from the US National Science Foundation, along with the Ukrainian ambassador, Markarova, who was able to meet together in person, actually, with a number of other US foundations and other funding agencies in the United States to talk about what the US might do and how the academies might help advise some of these efforts as more and more focus is on looking at the recovery and the rebuilding of Ukrainian research and the continued engagement internationally. So with that, I'll finish. I'm just so honored to have the opportunity to speak to this group. I'm sorry I can't be there to join you in person, but look forward to coming again in the near future. So thank you and congratulations on Science Day.
So, dear Vagan, thank you for your speech and for all efforts that you do. Зовсім нещодавно
Very recently, on the 20th of April this year, a memorandum of understanding was signed between the National Research Foundation of Ukraine and the Dutch Research Council. For several months, active joint work has been ongoing on the initiative additional grant opportunities of NWO and National Research Foundation of Ukraine for Ukrainian scientists, aimed at supporting researchers who are based in Ukraine. We introduced to you the video address from the acting director and leader of the International Policy Department of the Research Council of the Netherlands, Sebastian Den Bak.
It's really good to be with you today, and thank you very much for the invitation. It's an honor and a privilege to speak to you today on the Ukrainian Science Day. And first of all, I would like to congratulate Ukraine with this important day where we celebrate science and the international collaboration that comes with it. So I would like to tell you something about what we as NWO from the Netherlands are doing to support Ukraine and Ukraine science. Well, first of all, and very recently, we had a very successful working visit from two colleagues from NFRU. They were visiting the Netherlands for a whole week, and we had inspiring exchanges between several colleagues at NWO, where our procedures were shared. We shared best practices, and it was very relevant and inspiring for both delegations to talk to each other and to see also the immense spirit and the resilience of the colleagues at NRFU to work towards the war period, and also to look ahead to the capacity building that is needed and necessary after the war, or better said, after the Ukrainian victory. So that was a successful visit, and what was emphasized is that we are sister organizations, and that's a very important thing to stress, because we are working together within the European research area. We are partner organizations, but above all, we are also sister organizations that work together, that trust each other, and can achieve much together. So in the Netherlands, we created immediately a emergency fund for Ukrainian researchers in the Netherlands. We were able to support some individual researchers themselves or their families, because they were affected by the war. But also talking to NRFU, we came to know that a lot of Ukrainian researchers are still based in Ukraine, also during the war. And if we really want to do something, we can better help Ukrainian scientists in Ukraine. So that is where we are working on at the moment. We are trying to build a call together with NRFU to connect Ukrainian researchers to Dutch consortia that are already funded by NWO. And we basically ask the Dutch consortia to add a Ukrainian researcher to their consortium, to their network, and work together on the continuation of their project. That will lead to knowledge exchange, and it will also lead to capacity building and new international networks for Ukrainian scientists. So that is something important we are working on, and we hope to launch that call later this year. Well, next to that, I think also it's very important that we are working in a learning community within Science Europe, where both our organizations are a member. We share a lot of best practices. We do that in a European context within working groups, but we also do that on a global level in the Global Research Council. And in the end of the month May, we will host as NWO the 11th annual meeting of the Global Research Council in The Hague. And we have chosen the International Peace Palace as a venue which is very appropriate to also discuss science cooperation within Europe and the rest of the world. So on that note, I think there's much to share, there's much to work on together. I'm looking forward to continuing the cooperation with the Ukrainian research community and with NRFU. And for now, I would like to say a very happy and successful Ukrainian Science Day. Long live Ukraine, Slava Ukraini.
У 2022 році фонд міжнародних радників.
In 2022, the fund has created the Collegium of International Counselors in Ukraine, and they help cooperation with international organizations and institutions, involve international experts to evaluate projects that are submitted to consensus, and they also help to implement the work of the National Research Fund in Ukraine to implement the international experience and best practices into how it works. I would like to give the floor to Mr. Gerson Scher, who is the member of the Board of International Counselors.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bieling. I'd like to start by commending the NRFU and Olga Politska personally for organizing a really excellent and very substantive meeting. Let me make 3 points. First, the critical importance of science and higher education to Ukraine's future. Second, Ukraine's research and higher education system must undergo significant change, as many of the speakers have reminded us, to ensure its ability to contribute to that future. And third, that while Ukraine cannot do this alone, the tough decisions are Ukraine's and nobody else's. Allow me to elaborate. As to the first point, there will be many urgent tasks after Ukraine's victory, and the future of scientific research and higher education is among them. If Ukraine is to be successful in the long term, as an independent, sovereign, and economically competitive country, these must be top priorities. They must be impressed on both the government of Ukraine, which has been slow to recognize them, as well as on foreign funders, including current relief programs and the massive wartime post-war recovery programs that must follow. Secondly, to achieve these same goals, systemic change is essential. The likelihood and amount of future financial aid and other support for the recovery in Ukraine, both domestically and internationally, will depend on it. These changes can be evolutionary by building on reforms already initiated in Ukraine before the war, and not necessarily revolutionary in terms of drastically harming or even dismantling existing institutions. As I see it, there are 2 critical elements of this change. The first is vigorous support, both financially and politically, for the competitive funding of project-based research based on merit and peer review. The NRFU is the obvious and correct focus of this change, but it need not be restricted to the NRFU. Other institutions, such as universities and academic institutes, may also wish to adopt this modality, replacing the old Soviet-style system of top-down funding with proven methods to assess their own effectiveness. At the same time, core international funding, that which is necessary to sustain the institutions themselves, must be part of the picture, but not as the primary mode as in the past. The second pillar of evolutionary change, which I don't think we've heard enough about in this meeting, is strengthening the university research system. Reversing decades of atrophy under Soviet rule, Ukrainian government and universities should look to models of modern research universities in Europe, North America, and elsewhere. The reunification of leading edge research and education could not be a more urgent task. If legislation is needed to make this and other changes necessary, let it happen. Clearly, these two pillars, competitive research grants and strengthening university research and education, are closely related. Nor should they be seen as threatening other well-established institutions, such as the venerable academy system. To the contrary, they will strengthen the research institutes as well, not least of all, because they will help ensure the development of the next generation of researchers and professors, which is the most urgent task for Ukrainian science today. Now, such change is possible only if all parties are willing and able to think and act strategically. The worst possible outcome would be to treat research funding and policy as a zero-sum game, and to envision change only in light of short-term institutional interests and past practice. This strategic perspective will require strong leadership from the government of Ukraine, as well as the institutions I've mentioned here. And the third main point, Ukraine cannot do this all alone. The international community must not flag in its support of science in Ukraine. It did well in accommodating science refugees in the early months of the war, but the time has come to move beyond it and to focus on the 83% of Ukrainian scientists who have remained in Ukraine, as well as the Ukrainian research and education system. Science in Ukraine must be made attractive enough so that a significant number of those scientists who have left will wish to return to their homeland and contribute to its health and viability. Foreign institutions should refrain from cherry-picking the best refugees and recognize that a healthy research system is to the benefit of global science and, as I think Yulia Bezvershenko has mentioned, even world order. Money will be helpful, but even more important and more helpful will be the intangible things. Above all, research partnerships, training and mentoring in research and university management, access to infrastructure and publications, and caution, by the way, about predatory journals, and creative opportunities at every level to bring Ukrainian scientists into the global community. All that said, the decisions are up to Ukraine and no one else. Whatever decisions it takes, they will be difficult and entail both risk as well as benefit. I will emphasize again, it's not all about money, especially money from abroad. Ukraine's success in putting its impressive scientific talent to sustainable use will depend first and foremost on Ukraine's own strategic decisions, its ability to adapt to change and harmonize its systems with those countries that wish it well, wise leadership, and readiness to collaborate with the world scientific community as equals and not as supplicants. Finally, I would plead with Ukrainian institutions, as well as foreign supporters, to think and act out of the box, out of their normal comfort zones. In particular, I'd like to commend the U.S. National Academies and the European Research Council for their extraordinary efforts. I would also point out that while Ukraine's immediate focus is understandably on cooperation with Europe, the United States must also be a key partner. And moreover, American institutions are ready to do all we can, including financial support. The National Research Council of Ukraine, which I believe is a critical key to Ukraine's scientific future, deserves much credit to integrate Ukrainian science with Europe, and we in America look forward to working with its superb leadership to that end. Thank you. Slava Ukraini.
Recently, the European Commission has announced the decision on creating the Office of European Horizon program in Ukraine, and creating this office is a push to strengthen the participation of Ukraine in the Horizon Europe program and will help maintain the scientific and innovative potential of Ukraine in the difficult times for science. It will create sustainable connection between research and innovative communities of Ukraine and the EU, and will help the integration of Ukraine into European research space. So I would like to give the floor to the first Secretary of the Mission of Ukraine to the EU, Mr. Mikhailo Hrebenyuk. Good afternoon, dear participants. I hope that you can hear me all right. First of all, it's a great honor for me to have the opportunity to address you today. And as representing our office, our mission, I would like to sincerely congratulate you to the Science Day of Ukraine, and the fact that this event is being held in Kyiv evidences the invincibility of our science and Ukrainians in general. All of us knows that great challenges, they bring also great opportunities. And while our courageous defense forces counter the challenges, you scientists, first of all, are looking for new opportunities. And our diplomatic team, of course, not only the mission of Ukraine to the EU, but in general the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to the extent that it is possible, is helping you find these opportunities, helps strengthen the horizons of these opportunities. And as part of the mission for the past 4 years, I have been responsible for developing cooperation in research and innovation. And I must say that the dynamics of development of this cooperation in Brussels is impressive to absolutely everybody, despite the evident problems that have been already cited today. It still reflects the general political and social processes in the country. This is why our science and our talented youth has clearly identified the movement towards the European Union as a priority. Accordingly, the work of our mission is also aimed at systematic state needs, at supporting quick and unwavering way to the European Union. But we always say that the way to the European Union is through tedious work and reforms, but also through developing contacts between people, between scientists, teachers, students, artists, athletes, youth, because this allows citizens in the European Union to better understand us. And therefore, please allow me to thank you for working daily at the same level as the international European partners. You prove everybody that we, in fact, are the part of the European family. De facto, we are the inseparable part of the European research space, and the issue of joining the EU is only the issue of time. Today, at the beginning of the event, I had the opportunity to hear in the video address of Signoranza from the side of the EU many details on what exact help has already been provided, that help that is currently being prepared. But I would also like to ensure you that the work on future aid is continuing its tedious work, and it is also systematically done. And in this case, the European Commission, together with the government, together with us and everybody who is working on this, we are trying to study the needs of Ukraine. So I am very grateful for the opportunity to take part in this event today and to hear from many of you about the challenges that we are facing and the priorities that we have. Speaking about the EU itself, cooperation with the EU, I can describe in bigger detail, but I would recommend all of us to concentrate on 3 key vectors. And in our next dialogues with the European side, with each other and our internal meetings, to think about the steps in these directions and the things that we are lacking there. So the first vector that our cooperation is developing in is the aid in reforming the state policy. We have heard today that there is the need for that. For instance, the meeting in 2 weeks of the cluster will be dedicated to that. This is the consultation between the state bodies of Ukraine and the European Commission on the state of European integration, the problematic aspects, and the further plans. So here we can count on the expert aid of the European Union in using the best practices from Europe. The second block, so to say, is the aid related to the war and post-war recovery. And this, of course, these are the contests and competitions and grants that are now taking place and being planned. But of course, also, I would like to mention the two principally important things here, and the speakers indeed have emphasized them today. We also were able to agree on them with the European Union during the latest meeting of the Joint Committee on Cooperation in Science and Innovation at the end of 2022. First, we need to change the emphasis to help to Ukrainian scientists that remained in Ukraine and who are working for the Ukrainian economy, for Ukrainian defense, simply to support the scientific and innovation infrastructure right now. And the second direction is basically solidifying the important role of innovation and research in the further recovery of Ukraine. And in this case, the leaders in Europe are taking upon this advocacy role in this issue to use not only innovative solutions during recovery, but to maintain the innovative ecosystem and to have it prepared at the earlier stages to create conditions for our scientists, for our researchers, who could work starting now on preparing the recovery and accordingly during the recovery as well. So now the European Commission, with the member states, with the other international partners, with other partners, are working on consolidated position on how it could be done. And also the third block is, of course, the famous Horizon Europe. Ukraine was among the first countries who joined the program. And the recent unprecedented decision was the cancellation of yearly membership fee. And all of us now need to work as much as possible to use this window of opportunity optimally and in the interest of our scientists, both in Ukraine and outside Ukraine. We are grateful to the European Commission for another unprecedented decision to open the office of Horizon Europe in Ukraine. This was also in the description of this speech of mine. This is the formula that has been proven by years and the dozens of member states, and it's absolutely necessary office in our country. I'm convinced that this initiative will work and will bring significant effect. And founding it in the National Research Foundation was the decision of the European side, but they have analyzed the experience of other European countries, and they also see a lot of synergy in that. In addition, we count that the legal and the financial issues on both sides will be solved during June, July, and very soon the office will start operations. It is planned that the office becomes a certain bridge between our scientific communities, the Ministry of Science and Education, and also other institutions in science, and also the European Commission and other international partners. This office will, of course, carry out informational campaign, will inform the community about the new initiatives to support Ukraine during the war, and of course will help in finding partners and consortiums in Ukraine. It will serve also a certain generalized voice of our community, of course aligned with the state position. So I think it is very important that this office indeed is in touch and that our community is in touch with this office. And finally, the important task of the office is to try to jointly with the Ministry of Education and Sciences and other related institutions to coordinate the position of Ukraine in the program committees of Horizon Europe program and to help in developing the network of national contact points, grant offices in universities, and so on and so forth. We definitely lack this additional analytical and strategic function, because the instruments of the European Union are hard to call easy and understandable. I would also like to use this opportunity and in the spirit of the European Union to ask everyone to help aid this European initiative, Horizon Europe Office in Ukraine, to help it develop and strengthen. It is very important to prove to ourselves and moreover to our partners the ability for us to cooperate, to find joint solutions, to exchange contacts and experience, and to organize effective further communication with the partners. I would like to thank you once again for the opportunity to participate, and once again, as a representative of the diplomats of Ukraine, I congratulate you with the Science Day, and I hope for the further effective cooperation in Ukraine and outside.
Dear colleagues, dear friends, today we heard a lot of experienced people and important ideas. And in order to sum up today's event, I would like to invite the Executive Director of the National Research Foundation of Ukraine, Olga Polotska. Thank you. Dear friends, I understand that all of you are tired, so I will try to sort of step away from my prepared speech and explain what was happening on the brink of the full-scale war last year. On the 22nd of February, we were receiving our friends in our office who were developing the concept of Science Day in Ukraine 2022 together with us. 2 days later, the full-scale war broke out, and in the form that we were planning this event, it could not take place any longer. It took place in a transformed way. I don't know what this Science Day would have been like without the war, but today I am looking at people who are present here in this room. I am looking at those who joined us online. And I want to say that we have become stronger, strange as it may seem. It is true that even such tragic times can provide us with opportunities. And now I will move on to the official part. Our meeting is almost over, but I am confident that our unity, solidarity, and our work towards the development of Ukrainian science will go on. I am thankful to everyone, absolutely everyone who was present today, online or offline. Thank you for being here this year. And I am thankful to the Directorate of the National Research Foundation of Ukraine, which organized this event. Thanks to the support of our friends, our colleagues, the National Research Foundation of Ukraine not only survived, but also received an opportunity to develop and move forward, which means that scientists who applied or will apply for our competitions will be able to carry out their research in Ukraine, and it is invaluable for us today. Absolutely. I want to thank the Committee of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine on Science and Innovations. I want to thank colleagues from the Ministry of Education and Science of Ukraine for their comprehensive support, for always being with us. I am thankful to our diplomats, to our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, without whom some initiatives that you heard about today would have never been possible. I believe that in the near future, the foundation will be able to hold competitions under all vectors that are envisioned in the law on scientific activity, and the state budget will have enough funding for this. I'm confident that next year we will be able to tell you about new projects that have been funded thanks to the support of Horizon Europe office, which is currently being established based on the NRFU, which our speakers have spoken about multiple times. We are thankful to the European Commission for its support and, more importantly, for its faith in the National Research Foundation of Ukraine. I hope that very soon we are going to report on the first research that will be carried out as part of the competitions announced in 2022 and 2023. One of these competitions is fully funded by our partners from Cambridge University, and it will be followed by projects which will be carried out jointly with leading institutions of Switzerland, the Netherlands, Poland, Latvia, Lithuania, and other countries. This is our short-term perspective. A lot of sectors and a lot of regions of our country are currently damaged or destroyed. But these ruins will transform into a new modern Ukraine with the help of our partners. Happy Science Day and glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. Dear participants of our event dedicated to congratulating Science Day in Ukraine, thank you for your participation. Dear online participants, thank you for joining us and being with us throughout this event. Congratulations again and welcome to coffee.
Також, якщо є бажання, ми можемо зробити спільне фото. Ось тут, біля літер, з гарним освітленням, біля екрану. Так.